Jim, you got to witness the infancy of Chris Jericho's career when he was in Smoky Mountain. Did you ever have the aha moment when you realized he was going to be a big star?
Yeah, when I first saw the videotape of him before I brought him into Smoky Mountain Wrestling. Yes. And I mean, I didn't know that he would still be one of the top stars in the business 25 years later. I mean, I'm not going to take credit for that. But the reason why I brought him and Lance to Knoxville was because you could tell they were going to be stars of some description, both of them. I never thought that one of them would be one of the better promos in the business. Now, to be quite honest, because those early promos on everybody's part hurt my feelings on more than one occasion, but they looked so good and they were such athletic guys. But no, when I actually almost didn't even see the tape, because back in those days, the way you got booked was to send VHS tapes of one or more of your matches or a promo or whatever the case to the various booking offices, of which there were going to be fewer and fewer, but the independents or whatever. And I'd get tapes like that all the time. And you know, we've the tapes of the guy played the guitar with the singing dog and just everything, right? And yes, Godbold and just, I mean, guys at the county fair, and I mean, stuff that you see now on YouTube, and you used to have to go to a wrestling office and see it on VHS, because these people would send their tapes trying to get booked in a legitimate wrestling company. And most of the time, unless somebody that I knew and trusted put in a word for somebody, I wouldn't look at the tapes and I wouldn't use anybody unless I'd seen them, or in the case of, like, you know, Kevin Sullivan or whatever. But I don't know why I was just looking through a few tapes, because I actually had a few spare minutes in Smoky Mountain Wrestling, and I just thought, I'll get this shit out of my way. And something caught my eye. But maybe it was even Lance Storm, because that's a cool name. I don't know. But Lance had sent the tape, and it was a music video they'd done of him when he was working up at, I guess, Winnipeg. And it was a match with him against another guy named Chris Jericho that I'd never fucking heard of before either, because nobody ever had, except the people in Winnipeg. And they'd, you know, worked in a couple places in Canada, and they trained at the Harts. So I was like, okay, these guys, his letter said, we've trained with the Hart family and fucking, you know, worked here, blah, blah, blah. But when I saw the tape, you can just tell. It's like, I guess it's like if you're a Major League Baseball coach or an NFL coach or an NBA coach. To me, everybody that's playing basketball looks like they can halfway play basketball, right? Or whatever. But to those people, you can tell which ones can and which ones can't. And instantly, this was a night and day difference. You could tell they were green, but the moves, especially that Lance was doing athletically. And now everybody's going to go, oh, Cornette was hung up on high spots. No, I'm talking about the way he could leap from the ring to the top rope in one graceful jump. He had an incredible physique, and he was a young, good-looking guy. But the stuff that he and that Jericho was doing, even though it wasn't as crisp as their shit would get later on, you could tell they were safe. They weren't hurting each other. They knew what they were doing. Their footwork was right. They knew when they were putting this shit on and off of each other, or taking the bumps or whatever. They were a level ahead of anything that I was getting submitted from people I'd never heard of before. You don't often find a diamond and a turd like that. And so that's why and it took me a while, and Lance has told a story, but it took me a while to get a hold of him, because he had sent that tape a while before, and then he was in Germany or wherever, and found out that PJ Walker got involved. Just incredible, because he had worked with him and he knew how to contact him when he was going back to Canada. And I said, tell this fucking guy to call me, and blah, blah, blah. So it was months. But then when I talked to Lance, I said, well, what about the guy you were working with, Jericho? Would he want to come too? Well, yeah. And then here we go, because I wanted them to be a team because, number one, I could tell they were both going to be stars, and I wanted a hand in bringing them in and exposing them and hopefully grooming them a little bit, which we did had more time with Lance, but working with guys like Tony Anthony and Tracy Smothers and the Heavenly Bodies and Kevin Sullivan and the stars that would come in to get better. He wasn't going to work with experienced talent like that anywhere else in his immediate future. He'd be going to Japan, and, you know, it was not conducive to learning your psychology to work in Japan at that point in time. But also I wanted both of them because you could tell they were going to be something. If we could help train them, yes, that would be wonderful. So they'd be an asset to the business. And also maybe I would have a team that would get over and be revolutionary for me first, instead of bringing them both in as singles. Because to be honest, then having tag team matches with an experienced tag team was a little bit easier. Doing a Southern style that even Chris admits he had no idea until he kind of got what he kind of got, and Lance does too. Being a tag team was easier. And also you'd have two young, I didn't want to leave one sitting for a fucking year, and you'd have two young guys starting at the same time that both were very athletic and flashy and both kind of Canadian, even though Chris is both. So they would have canceled each other out. Neither one would have stood out. This way, both guys came in and you could try to make an impact with them. And then it just, I would have stuck with that as long as it had to be until Chris, unfortunately, shooting star pressed the Invisible Man and brought to an end the team of Storm and Jericho.
Other than Storm and Jericho and I think Daryl Van Horn, who else would you have discovered by going through videotapes that you brought into Smoky Mountain Wrestling?
I saw Bruiser Bedlam in person, saw Candido and Tammy in person. Al Snow, I had seen him once, but I'd already decided because Tony Anthony came back, and Tony very rarely said anything good about anybody unless it was one of his friends. And he had told me, hey, this kid should have a job somewhere. He's great. When Al had originally worked on just a couple of shows I think we did with Bobby Blaze up near Ashland, because Al was in Ohio at the time. I mean, God, I wish I had a list of everybody that ever worked Smoky Mountain Wrestling. There wasn't too many that I found for the first time by video, unless I had already heard about them and got a video to see because I hadn't seen them yet or something like that. But just discovering on video, they may have been the only ones.
I got to go through all of Dennis Carluzzo's videos years and years ago, and I got to see all of the people that would send in videos looking for work in New Jersey. And I'm curious if you had the same experience. Did you get a lot of videos of just guys, either big but not exactly in shape or cut, or just big fat guys wearing Ultimate Warrior face paint?
Oh, you think?
He had
Good
so
Lord.
many of those. They were all gold.
Yes, it was just at that point. Now every fucking little midget that can flip thinks they can be a wrestler. Back then, every 300-pound fucking fat guy was 35 years old thought they could be a wrestler. It was just what they were seeing at the time being featured. They didn't understand that there also needed to be, talent involved and training and, a brain and things like that. So, yeah, but it's phases. It was muscle builders sending pictures in the 80s, and then it was fat guys and face paint guys and muscle builders sending tapes in the 90s, and then the hardcore shit and ECW style shit and setting themselves on fire and stuff. And then over the last 10 years, at least they don't. Well, I was about to say they don't set each other on fire anymore, but we know the guy in the Philippines. But also he made up for it by only being 135 pounds and doing a flip at the same time while he was on fire. So it just changes, but usually tapes are not good.
That could be your next Christmas item, the tryout tapes of Smoky Mountain Wrestling on DVD.
I had all of them until we finally moved back into the castle here for good, and then I saved some of the All-Stars, but I had to toss tons because I was never going to watch them again, but some of that stuff was just so, yeah. You just didn't want to throw it away.
Well, you have the All-Stars. You could put out an all-winners edition, and then you could, have nothing else.
I actually do still have the Lance Storm tape.
The original tape he sent you?
Yes.
What about Daryl Van Horn stuff?
I may very well have that. I remember Lance's but I may very well have that also. Because I would save stuff that I kind of got a tickle out of. But actually, yeah, Daryl Van Horn would have been the other one because I would have had no way to see him ahead of time. And I found Canyon through him because he said, hey, I got this guy that works down here that lives next to me in South Carolina. And I think Van Horn may not have had a driver's license. I don't know. But he's like, he could ride with me and do jobs. And I'm like, his name's Chris Cluxeritis. But he works. Then he said, but he works as Chris Canyon. I think he said, I was okay. That's better. And that's how I found Canyon.
In terms of promos, did anyone out there really have a shot? If someone just started sending in random videos to Smoky Mountain Wrestling and they were really cutting 5-star promos, would you stop, look at it, and consider doing something? Or
Daryl Van Horn.
But beyond him.
Yeah. Well, it never ever happened.
No one just sent in great promos.
Not unless I already knew who the fuck they were to begin with and was either watching to prep because they were coming in, or just I knew who they were to begin with, and it just for whatever other reason they did a great promo, but it wasn't going to work financially or geographically or whatever. But I don't remember anybody that I'd never heard of sending in what I would consider to be a 5-star promo and me never contacting them.